just happen in coordination. So we do them in a sequential way. So one goes from one to another. Okay. Welcome, Chalili. You're a bit late. And thank you. You reminded me to record the class because apparently I've not been recorded, but I've started recording it now, so don't panic. Then fixing defect found, communicating defects to the appropriate team and people, so to work on it, recording the updated status of defects, gathering the matrix, checking that the exit criteria has been met, accepting the documentation as complete. All of this is done during the fixing and reporting part of it. Okay. Now, as part of the review, we need to define who does what. Okay. There's usually two sets of people. The person who writes the plan or who writes the review plan, yeah, or who set it all out. That's the author. Most of the time, for a test project, this will be the test manager, or in some instances, the test lead. You as a software tester might not have to write this, but you would implement this. Okay, so the author will write it, fix defects in the documentation, is responsible for planning the review, assign people, budget time to the review, monitors progress reports and all of that, control every aspect of it, decisions and all of that. This most of the time will be the project manager or the program manager working in tandem with the test manager. So usually you have a project, you have a project board, then you have a program board, and then you have all sorts of boards everywhere. But the test manager usually work alongside the project manager. So everything the test manager does, the project manager knows, because the project manager has to feedback or report to a program manager who will report to some other board somewhere. But we don't have to worry about it. Okay, what we need to worry about is how this happens, who does what, how is it done. Okay, now these four review types is what static testing is about. Okay, so when you have the authors, then you have the reviewers. Now, the reviewers could be a lot of different people. They could be subject matter experts. They could be the testing. When I write scripts sometimes, or when I write my plan, I usually give it to my test team to review for me. Now, they might not have the sort of knowledge I have to correct anything, but that is beside the point. The point here is two things. One, that will give them an idea of what's coming. So they will start preparing because they've seen it. Usually, like I said to people, English is not my first language. So I'm prone to typos, grammatical errors, and all of that. But my team always come through. They correct me. Okay, so the reviewers could be your test team, your team members, could be the project management, could be the business analyst, could be anybody. You know, these people will be able to look at your plan, read through it, read your documents, and then start looking at potential defects to say this is wrong. They will come with different perspectives as well. You have testers, you have programmers, you have end users, you have stakeholders, you have business analysts, you have usability expert, you have security expert, or you have someone who just recorded. We call them scribe. You have someone who just write them down for you, or who transcribe for you, or your PMO, or something like that. Everybody comes with different perspective. So when you get the feedback, you get different point of feedbacks. Okay, that will make your review very robust because the contribution is wide. It's from a lot of different people. It's from a lot of different places. It's huge. Okay, so that's what reviewers do. Okay, and that's how review works. You sit down, you plan it, you write the document, then you pass it up to the team to review for you, to read, to ask you questions, to go through the flow, they check the flow, the workflow, the process, they check everything, and they feedback to you. This could be done formally. It could be documented from A to B to C to D, or it could be word of mouth, which is informal. Like we need to do this, I just need you guys to do that, and there's no documents around it. Okay, so let's quickly go through each of these review types and see. And we won't spend too much time on it, but I just want to walk you through them. So let's go through the informal review. This is something called pairing or peer review, body check. It could be done by your guys. The main purpose of this is to detect potential defects. The main reason informal review happen is for people to go, that is wrong, or that might be wrong, that is not correct, that might not be correct. Okay, to identify additional purposes, maybe generating new ideas and solutions, solving minor problems. This is not based on any formal documented process, so everyone comes at you from every angle at any time, depending on when they have time to talk to you, depending on when they were able to get hold of you, depending on the schedule of the project and when each person can get hold of you to discuss what they've reviewed with you. So it may not, or it may involve the review meeting. There might not be any meeting involved. It might just be one-on-one chat with somebody. It might be a team chat across the desk. It might be a phone call, someone calling you to tell you what to do and stuff. It might be performed by your team, your other team members, developers, business analysts, service providers, everyone, anyone. And the result may actually be documented, even though it's informal. Someone might decide to go, you know what, I'm going to write my report and send it to you instead. This could happen in a lot of different ways. The whole point is it is not predefined how it will go. So no one knows in what shape or form the report will come back. Okay. So the usefulness of this depends on the reviewers, and it varies. And people may not use checklists. People may not even follow any instruction on what you've asked them to do. Will any reviewer who does not know the requirement analysis do in a better position to review? Everybody will review. A lot of people would not know about it. They would not know about the requirement analysis. A lot of people will try to apply logic to it. Logical reasoning is what a lot of people would apply to it. Some people will have access to the requirement document. So you get all flavors of it. You have some people who knows what the application should do. Then you have some other people who don't, but who have seen so many documentation that they can apply logical reasoning to tell you line 3 should be before line 1, or this is not going to work in this flow. You have to invert it. A lot of different knowledge level exist on project. So it does not matter most of the time if they've seen the requirement or not. Some people are able to apply logical reasoning to stuff and give you very good input, while some other people will read the requirement document and come back to you. Okay, and this form of review is very, very common in agile development when people are doing sprint. As in, people stand up in the morning and tell you everything. So when you are at the review stage of the project and you are doing Scrum in the morning and people are saying, you get all sort of input at that point. Like on their feet, people standing, thinking on their feet, I think we should not do, yes, they can do that on experience, Jalili. So some people will tell you things that I think we should take item 3 out of this sprint because it's going to cause us problems further down the line. They may not tell you why, but that's their input. Now, you either take the input or you don't. It depends on who's leading it and how you want to, how you want to control what you're reading or what you're leading or what you're doing so that everybody will be involved in it. Some people will not bother to take anybody's input, and some people will take everybody's input. It depends. So that's how informal review works. Now, we go to walkthrough. Now, walkthrough does similar things to informal review, is a review type as well, but it is structured in such a way that you are basically walking people through the process, through the requirement, through the workflow, through everything, through documentation. Okay, it has to be recorded. It has to be recorded like this is how this is being done. This is how we are doing this. This is what we are doing. So it's more or less like the way you don't do it on informal review style, you're doing it through walkthrough. Okay, and also the main purpose is to find defects. Similar to informal, the objectives are the same, but here recording what you're doing is mandatory. You have to record it. You can say you are developing scenarios. Some of this might ring a bell with some of you. Scenarios, dry run, simulations, potential defect logs and review report may be produced before you actually get there. So you are trying to detect potential defects, gain consensus on how to approach stuff, you know. So you're trying also to evaluate quality, build confidence in the work product, generating new ideas, all sort of things you try to do with the informal style. You're trying to do here as well. But the key thing to remember here is that this is recorded. It is formal. It has to be recorded. All of the output has to be recorded. All of the input from everybody has to be recorded. You have to have specified as in defined, predefined entry and exit criteria, which is something that may not exist in the informal time. So here we need to set specific deadlines, red lines to say, right, this is what we're doing and this is how we're going to do it. You collect metrics. So this is structured, proper structured, documented process. But the objective, the actual doing, similar to the informal review. Okay, and you can combine them. You can combine informal and walkthrough as to use them together. Okay. Now the other two on this diagram are attributes of the previous two. Remember when I was talking about informal and walkthrough, I said it could be peer review. Yes, it could be an inspection. So the last two, they are attributes. So you could have you could do a peer review where I write something as a test manager and you guys are my test team, and I just basically give it to you guys to read and review and get back to me on what you see, what you think I should change, what should not be there, and stuff like that. Or you could inspect what I'm doing, or I could inspect what you're doing. Those are all review types. Okay, these are all review types, and all of this happens during static testing. Okay, so we move on to applying review techniques. Right, what are review techniques? Yeah, so the review techniques can be described as the way we deploy the different types of reviews, or whichever type of review we want to use. How do we deploy it? Okay, now there are quite a few ways to do it. I think about 5 is covered in the syllabus. The most common one is the ad-hoc. Ad-hoc means there's little or no guidance, basically, for reviewers. Then, because most of the time, at that time of the project, there's not a lot going on. Everyone knows what we're trying to do. Everyone knows the application we're trying to build. Everyone knows what the application does, even though we've never seen it. But as at that time, there's not a lot to go on. We haven't seen the application. The developers haven't started coding. Nothing is happening, but we're preparing to do it. So everyone knows what the objective is. So everyone is kind of going, okay, let's start brainstorming. Let's start thinking, how are we going to do X, Y, Z? Okay. So ad hoc, reviewers are usually provided with little or no guidance on how this task should be performed. The bottom line is we need to do this task. No one has done it before, so let's go and do it. Okay. It needs little or no preparation at all because there's not a lot of predetermined metrics for it. You can start now and finish now. You finish when you say you finish. There's no target for it. There's no you have to do X, Y, Z. No. It's just something you do randomly. It's just, I want to check that my wristwatch will stay on my wrist. How do I do that? I don't have the wristwatch now. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna measure my wrist and then see, um, what length, what usual length the wristwatch is. Stuff like that. No one's told me what my wrist size should be in order for it to fit. No one's told me what the length of the wristwatch, the wristband of the watch will be when it comes out. I don't know any of that. That's Ad-Hoc. Then you have that's very common. That's usually very, very common. The other common one is scenarios and dry runs. So basically, some of you, I think some of my ex-teammates are on this meeting tonight. We do scenarios based. For example, if I say to you, the pregnant woman is going to deliver a baby in the hospital, that's a statement. If I want to break that down, I could get like 4 or 5 different scenarios out of it. She actually gave birth in the car on the way to the hospital. She gave birth at home before they even left. She gave birth in the hospital when they got there. She got to the hospital, did not give birth. She came back home and gave birth at home. There are so many ways we could break that down. We could use all sorts of things, which we could deploy all sorts of exit to it. In real life, things that happen. Some people have stillbirth, some people have multiple birth, some people have multiple birth, but on different days. I've heard of people who gave birth to a child today, and they give birth to the twin brother 2 days later. These things do happen. But if I say to you, a woman is going to the hospital to give birth, that's just one statement. So we use scenarios and dry runs to define what could happen. So we're not actually touching the system. We're just thinking in our head, how could this turn out to be? How could this end? And when you're designing scenarios, you are open-minded. You look at every eventual possibility, that you could think of, because we can't test everything. That was one of the things we learned in the first class. So these things you do, you use scenarios, you use dry runs. Dry runs means you've now documented, you read through it to see if it makes sense. Okay, so those two are very, very common. Then you have the role-based. There's something that is called Auerbach, role-based access control. When we do, when we develop some systems, we assign authority to roles. For example, you would not expect to go to the hospital and have the ward clerk, give you injection. What does she know she's giving you? Or you would not expect to go to the hospital and see the doctor mopping the floor. It's not like whoever comes first does this. No, no, no. Everyone has their own set rules of things they should do in the system. So a surgeon will do surgery, a medical doctor will see patients, outpatient clinics will run clinic, outside people will go home, come back, go there, wherever. Inpatient, patient will be admitted in. You don't do things randomly. Everyone is assigned. That's role-based. Okay? And then perspective-based. These are the knowledgeable people on the project that I've seen that have deployed a lot of different projects that have seen similar things happen, like marketers, designers, operations, and the stakeholders who have seen a lot. They will usually have a viewpoint. For example, if we have an application now that we're trying to put into the market, you would have some people, without starting the project with you, without knowing what your application does, will come to you and go, I think we should market it this way. Then you'll be wondering, hang on a minute, how did you come about that? Oh, don't worry about it. I've done in the last 6 months, I've done 50 of these things. I know it works. Can you really argue with that? No, because they've done it before. They've done it several times over. So that's what these two slides covers, the different review types, the perspective based, the checklist based as well, where you create a checklist of things to run through. That is very definitive, is well defined. We need to have checked X, Y, Z. We need to have checked this thing. So it's a tick box exercise that these are the things you want to do, and these are the things you would do. Okay. So I didn't spend too much time on those two, but you need to remember the scenarios and driving happens all the time. Happens all the time, because you should be able to visualize and look at things and go, this could either end like this or like that. Like the example I gave you, a pregnant woman going to the hospital to give birth, it could come out in so many different ways. The best thing is you want to have covered as many of those outcomes in your scenarios as possible. When someone goes into the hospital for surgery, for example, the true part, the ideal situation is they go in for surgery, they come out of coma, they go back home. Yeah, go in, get surgery done, go back home. In reality, that's like half of the real outcome. Some other people go do the surgery, they stay in the hospital. Some people don't come back. Some people come back and have to go back into the hospital daily. Some people go get it done, then have to be transferred to another hospital because something else happened. There's so many different ways these things do end. And you as the tester or the test team or your test manager should have the visualization to think through that this could go this way or that way. It could go any other way. The ideal thing is you've covered all of those scenarios in your review, in your planning, in your testing, so that you are not caught by surprise. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's usually how it happens. Okay. So um, today, let's go to when we've done all of that, then let's look at the success factors, right? Now, because we are trying to do something on something we are not seeing, okay, we need to, first of all, select the appropriate review type depending on what we're doing, okay? If we are doing a project with a lot of documentation that has a lot of requirement catalog and all of that, I would expect to deploy a structured review process to it because I've got documents. Okay? I've got a lot of documents that I could use to write my own document, use to plan and all of that. So that would be structured. Okay. If it's a project that has no document as such, that would be informal. Everyone would do as much as they can do to get to the objective. Okay. Now, each review has objective, right? We need to make sure those objectives are met. Talking about the successes. Yeah. Now, when we talk about the organizational success, the organization as a role must provide the tools that we need to achieve the objective of the review. Okay. So, and any review technique we use must be appropriate. Either checklist or role-based, it must be appropriate. You can't tell me, oh, we want you to do a role-based review when you haven't defined any role. I did a project recently. Before I got there, before I put my team on the ground, everyone do testing using their own access login. So they use system, what's that thing called? System analyst and DBA to test. So they have access to all parts of the system. That is not a bad thing. Actually, that is not a bad thing at all because they will see every part of the system. The problem is out there, no end user uses DBA or system analysts as their daily role. They are either doctor, pharmacist, nurses, clinician, all sorts of people, but not a single DBA or system analyst. Can someone tell me what the problem with that is? Basically, the testing is not valid. You can't tell anyone authoritatively how the application would behave because you've not done it like they would do. You've not used the same access they would use to test it. The best you could do for them is, it might be like this when you log in. No. You don't want to be there. You want to be at when you log in, this is what would happen. Not when you log in, this might happen. No. So the testing might be valid for you because you've got access to every part of the system you're looking at. The people that would use it will only see a fraction of the system based on what they do. Now, if you haven't tried it the way they would use it, you can't advise them. So the organization must provide the tools you need to make sure it's successful. And if you are being people-related success as well, each person must do their review to meet the objectives using their different skill set. Okay, so testers usually we are seen as valued reviewers because we do documentation a lot. We do documentation a lot. We write document, we define stuff. I think we are one of the people who can tell you the end point of something before we actually start. It's not a joke. I'm not making it up. Seriously, we do. I can tell you right now that for me to tell you the testing of this is ready, we should have met these 20 conditions, and I'll define the conditions for you. And if we don't meet those conditions, we would have completed testing. And I could have defined that for you a year before go live. How do we know that? Because we review stuff. It's not magic. It's not, the guy's a genius, he will tell you. No. Nothing like that. You basically get stuck into it, read all sorts of document, the boring stuff. The requirement document sometimes is hundred of pages. If you've seen a requirement catalog before, and on some big project, Jesus Christ, is massive. We have to read through them all because we need to identify what's testable and what's not. How we test them. You know, we read documents, so we are seen as valued reviewers. So they take our input seriously. They take our input very seriously because whatever we say is based on what we've read. Okay, so these things do come like this. So the factors there have either be organization or people, but everybody has to play their own part. Okay, and that's very important. Okay, so the last chapter today for us is test technique. Okay, now there are so many different techniques of testing. Okay, but the purpose of a test technique is to identify test conditions, test cases, and test data, and how all of them will work together. That is what a test technique does for you, right? And the choice of which test technique to use depends on so many things. Is open season. So many things, so many factors are involved in determining which test technique you should use. I'll give you a few examples. The note has all of it. You'll be looking at the risk types, the risk level, the test objective, type of component or system you're testing, the complexity of it, the customer or contractual requirement, time and budget available to you, the available tools to you, previous experience doing such things, all sorts of factors. They come into you choosing the right technique for it. Okay. And when you are creating test cases, testers generally use a combination of these things. We use a combination of test techniques to get the best result from our test effort. Okay, so test technique are they're in three categories. It's three. I think it's three. Yeah, it's three categories. We have the black box testing and the white box testing. I have a question here. Does it mean that as a test manager proceed in the testing stage, someone from the consumer end or end user must work with the team till the end? The answer is yes and no, Jalili. I'll come back to that. Bear with me. But the answer is yes and no. But I'll come back to that in a bit. So during the first class, I did mention the black box and white box testing and what it means. So we're going to go a little more into detail today. Okay. So Black box testing, also known as behavior-based technique, are based on analysis of the appropriate test basis, like requirements, specification, and all of that. Okay, you can apply black box testing to both functional and non-functional tests. Right now, white box testing, called structural or structure-based technique, it's based on the analysis of the architecture, the detailed design, the internal working, the structure, or the code of what you're trying to test. Remember the example I gave you 3 weeks ago, that a mechanic that wants to service a car will do what? Take apart the engine. They take out the plug, filter, oil tank, they put everything outside. They are scrubbing it, they are wiping it, they are cleaning it, they are flushing it, they are looking into the bare structure of it. That's white box. Okay. But black box, I want to search for something, I go on Google, search for Dr. Doolittle. I type Dr. Doolittle in, press enter, it gives me a result. Do I care how it does it? I don't care. Input, output. That's it. White box is input, internal workings, put a scanner to it, look through everything, structure, the framework, everything, and then the output. Okay, so we use this, sometimes we combine them. Okay, and so let's start with the common characteristics of it. Um, we use them to define test condition, test cases, to detect gaps between requirements. Coverage is measured based on item tested, how it's tested, how it's spread out. A lot of different characteristics is there in my notes, but let's quickly go on to black box testing itself. Okay, now there's something called equivalence partitioning. So this is a process where you have a piece of activity where you break say for example, test data, yeah, into equal partitions. So you make sure that every part of every section is tested. So for example, you have 1 to 10, okay, and you break it into 5 pieces. You need to make sure that in each of the 5 boxes, you choose your test data from there. So you have a wide coverage. Okay, so equivalent partitioning means you partition your test data into the same group, into same flex. So when you pick a data from A, B, C, D, the data is representative of the whole test data. Okay, you have valid values. This is well described in my notes. I will implore you to read it carefully. Okay, and when you partition stuff, the partition itself can be further partitioned. I don't know if that makes sense. So if I have 100 as a whole and I've divided them into 10, that means I have 10, then 11 to 20, then 21 to 30, and so on and so forth. I can further divide 11 to 20 into 5 groups. So I now have 11 and 12, 13 and 14, 14 and 15, 16 and 17. I can further divide them. Okay. The whole point is the test data must be representative of the whole 100. So if I stick with the 10, division of 10, I must use test data covering the whole 10 partitions. Your test must cover all the partitions and sub-partitions as far as it goes. That's what equivalent partitioning does. Okay? Now, if you look at this properly, you would realize that failures can be masked. Something could pass in equivalent partitioning test that could actually be a failure. Okay. Now, you can easily cover 100%. You can have 100% coverage on equivalent partitioning, but is it 100% though? Because what you've done is you've taken a sample, you've taken a partition from all the sub-partitions to represent the whole picture. Is it the whole picture? There are further explanation of this in further classes. Let's move to the next one. Now, boundary value analysis. This is an extension of equivalent partitioning, but can only be used when the partition is ordered, not disorganized. Ordered, consisting of numeric or sequential data. So if you have 1 to 10 and you split them up, or if you have 1 to 100 and you split them up, the boundary of it, yeah, the boundary of it. So if you have 1 to 5, for example, yeah, and a single integer is required as a value input, yeah. So you input 1. So the valid range is 1 to 5, inclusive. Now, to test the value of it, you want to test 6 or 0. This is what I'm saying. So you've looked at your boundary is 1 and 5, inclusive, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 6 is not included, 0 is not included. So you look at the two boundaries on both sides and you test around there as well. Now, that test on its own is valid. Does it give you 100% coverage? No. Why? Because you've tested the boundary. What about the actual data itself? That's why equivalent partitioning and boundary value analysis are matched and used together. Okay? Now, if we have decision table testing, now this is something that happened in a technical project a lot, much more than user controlled or end user driven project. Because end user driven project, you're dealing with the product. It's been developed. You're testing it. You're doing all of the system testing, functional manual, and all of that testing. Here, you are putting your test cases out there based on decision that should give you the actual desired coverage. Okay, I'm not going to bore you with this a lot. The note explains it. Okay, but for this one, you have all sorts of different conditions. You have valid and invalid condition. You have blank void condition. You have no condition. When you see the note, have a read at it. Don't stress yourself too much about it. Okay, but get a basic understanding of the first two that I've explained to you: equivalent partitioning and boundary value analysis. The same thing with state transition testing. Don't worry yourself too much about it. Okay, but get an understanding of it. Okay, now use case testing is something that is common as well. Okay, and you can derive your test from use cases. Uh, which is a specific way of designing interaction between software and some software items and some other requirements of software function represented by use cases. So you could define an interaction or an activity or a precondition or postcondition as a use case. Okay, you could say anything. You could define something that has an attribute of the software as a use case, and that will become a valid test. Okay, now most of the time, this also happens on technical projects a lot. So, but get an understanding of it. It is really important you understand it, because what you won't do technically, you would do it when you are doing an end user driven project, for example, because all of this mentality wraps up into your mentality as a tester. Okay, and the whiteboard testing as well is all about coverage. How much of it do you see? How much of it can you test? If I show you this diagram here, so this is the last one. So with whiteboard testing, we have the statement, decision, and the value of statement. Now, all of those combined can give you 100% coverage, but it doesn't mean you've tested everything. So because of the granular nature of white box testing, these things are usually combined, but sometimes not. Okay, so you need to understand how these things work with one another. Okay, so quickly, I have experience-based test technique. Now, this could be used either as black box or white box, okay? And you could use them in any way, but this is something that people who have done a lot of projects usually do. Now, the key thing there that I want you to note is exploratory testing. Exploratory testing is massive. I'm going to do a class on that, and we're going to do a lot of exercise. I think we should do that next week, actually, on exploratory testing. It's huge, it's massive, it's a very big component of testing. And our next class is going to be focused entirely on that. But before you can error guess something, before you can suggest something, you must come with some knowledge and perspective, which is experience based. So you've done these things before, you know how it works. Some people will tell you, that's how it works. I've done that so many times, I can tell you in my sleep. So these three techniques here, error guessing, you can guess what will cause the application to fail. For example, if you give me some electronic patient record system, I can guess to you, and I'll probably be right, what could break easily, what could break consistently, because I've done them over the past 20 years. I've done so many of them. So I know. So these are the things that this class is not supposed to be interesting, but I've tried not to make sure it's not boring as well. But these are the inner technicalities of software testing. You need to understand these things to give you a very good platform to launch your career as a software tester. Okay. Now, coming back to your question, Jalili, yes, someone from the customer end usually work with the team. Now, look at it this way. Who is the customer? So I'm on a project. I'm not the developer. My company is not the developer. So the development company, for example, says Sana is the developer. They are developing the product. I am on the project as the client, as the test manager for the client. So am I the customer or not? Because when you look at a project, you usually have the developer and then you have project manager and testers and all of that. Now, if the development is being done in-house, like we all belong to the same organization, all of us are the clients, all of us are the development team as well, because we all work for the same company. Okay, so it depends on who you want to define as the end user or customer end user. Now, if the developer is a different company and the client is a different company, now everybody working for the client is the customer working with the developer. I don't know if that answers your question, because this thing is not black and white. So you could have a project that have a software development company that will provide the product, and then you have the client that will buy and use the product, and the client has put together a project team. Myself, project managers, program managers, all of us, we all work for the client. All of us, as far as the development company is concerned, we are the customers, even though we are test managers and we are not nurses and doctors. We are just test manager, project manager, X manager, service transition manager, whatever. We are the end client, end users working with the developers. Now, if we all work for the same company and the development is in-house, we are all the developers and we are also the clients. So it depends on what side of the divide you are, what the nature of the project is. But most of the time, you would have somebody from the customer end on the team. And it doesn't necessarily mean an end user. It could be a project member. It could be anyone. But the interest, that's why we call them stakeholder, the interest of the client and the developer is usually represented on the project team. Okay? I don't know if that answers your question. Does anyone have another question? Does anybody have any other question? Because we've come to the end of the class. Next week, our class is going to start promptly at 6:05. We're going to do a lot of exploratory testing, hands-on, practical exploratory testing stuff. And I'm going to explain to you what exploratory testing means. And we would see how it works. I would also give you some core lectures on how to generate some basic document, because I want us to start practicing what we're doing and have a project to share with you to start practicing what you've been learning. And that is about to be ready anyway. So I want us to be ready, so we start from where we are with the knowledge we have, and we start building ourselves up. Now, the platform is, I've got some questions here. Oh, that's okay, Jalili. Everybody makes mistakes. That's fine. As long as I'm able to answer your question, that's okay by me. If I can't answer the question, then we all struggle. But I'll try to answer the question. Francis said, can it be said that white box and black box technique is a mix for experience-based technique? Exactly. Exactly. Some mechanic will tell you without opening the bonnet of the car, by just hearing the sound of the vehicle, and they'll tell you, oh, the fan belt is gone. Oh, the clutch is gone. How did they know? Because they've dealt with that for years. They know the kind of sound that a faulty fan belt gives. They know the kind of sound that a burnt clutch gives. They know the smell. They don't need to actually open the bonnet. Some people will tell you, what did you do? This is what happened. Oh, your gasket is gone. That's experience talking. How did he know? He hasn't actually opened the bonnet. So yes, they could, it is experience based, but it could be white box or black box. The experience could be in all of these things. Like sometimes when I look at some specification, I look at it and go, this is going to give me a problem. This is going to be sticky. How did I know? Because I've done it so many times before. I know. I'll give you an example. I did a project some years ago. I was able to test everything I wanted to test. But there's this particular test item. I needed the live environment to do it. I didn't get the live environment to do it before it went live, and I could not test it. And I told my program manager, this is going to give us stress. And it did, because we didn't know how it will respond. So we were not prepared for the response. But everything else that we said will happen, happened. Because we did that, we've known, we've seen that. Some of us have done that so many times before. But that particular one, I know it's going to give me stress. I was keen to do it, but I wasn't able to do it because I didn't have access to the right tools, right domain to do it before it went live. And oh boy, did it worry me? Yes, it did. So experience could be, I've done this before so many times, so I know. Trust me on it. That's usually experience. So people will tell you straight away that thing is not going to work. How do you know? Because that was me 10 years ago trying to fiddle with it. Exactly the same thing you're doing. So generally, white box, black box, a mix of it could all come into experience-based technique, because some people have done these things over and again. They know how these things work. They know the sort of responses you get from it. So they can tell you without opening any book, without touching anything, that what you're doing is going to give you this type of problems, because I know I've done it before. I hope that answers your question. If anybody has another question, please type it on. I'm just going to round up now while we're talking about this. So the developer building the platform is taking its time. I was hoping I'll have something to share with you, but I don't at the moment. But hopefully that should be ready soon. As soon as it is ready, you guys will be responsible for testing it. So you guys will test the platform yourself. I will be there to guide you. I'll be there to support you, answer your questions, but you will test it. And once you've tested it and we are happy with it, it goes live. And once it's live, then we start taking on test projects. Now, everybody has to register. And I would advise you to register with details that you use regularly, because it will come to a point where you will be paid for what you're doing. Your name must match the name on your bank account. So you need to remember these conditions when you are registered. So when you are doing your registration on the platform, make sure your name and phone number matches what you have on your bank account. We would not be asking for your bank account to start with, but when we get to the point where we're doing live projects and we are getting project that comes with budget and people are finding issues and reporting them and we are fixing them and we're increasing the quality of applications sent to us, people will be paid for that. And if we get to the point of trying to pay you, then your details must match. We all know our Nigerian rules, so I don't want us to fall into that trap. Um, if no one has any other question, I think we've come to the end of the class today. Thank you so much for attending. Don't forget to leave feedback for me. If there's anything that you want to know that I've not mentioned, please send me an email and I'll try to include it in any of the class. If there's something you have in your mind as a question that you want to ask, please don't be shy. Ask me any question. I'll try to answer it to the best of my knowledge. If I can't answer your question on the class, I will send you an email. Okay, so you can ask me questions anytime. Our next class is going to be next Friday. I'll send the invite out as soon as I can. Um, I don't have anything else to say. Thank you so much. And I was speaking about certification for those of you who came late. I'm working on trying to get a lot of people to write the exam together at the same time. But once I have updates for you, I would let you know. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice evening. Have a nice weekend, and we'll see each other again next week. Take care, and thank you very much for attending.